The courtroom air was stagnant, heavy with the scent of floor wax and old timber. Silence, thick and suffocating, had descended upon the gallery. All eyes were fixed on the slight, solitary figure standing before the bench. Zara Vance, a black teenager in a simple charcoal blazer, stood with a posture that defied the gravity of the scorn being hurled at her. Judge Horace Blackwood, a man whose reputation for severity was matched only by his arrogance, had spent the better part of 20 minutes dismantling her presence. He leaned over the bench, his spectacles sliding down his nose, a sneer curling his lip. "You seem to be under the impression, young woman, that this court is a venue for extracurricular dramatics," Blackwood boomed, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is a court of law, not a debate club for children playing dress-up. Do you honestly believe you can navigate complex property statutes where seasoned litigators struggle?" Laughter rippled through the room, sycophantic and cruel. At the opposing table, Attorney Silas Thorne, representing the wealthy landlord Marcus Sterling, smirked as he shuffled his papers, clearly regarding the girl as a nuisance rather than a threat. "This is a waste of the court's time, Your Honor," Thorne added, checking his watch. "The defendant is clearly out of her depth." Zara waited for the laughter to die down. She adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was not the tremulous whisper of a frightened child, but a resonant, steady force that cut through the humidity of the room. "Your Honor," Zara began, "I believe you'll find that under the North Haven Tenant Protection Act, Section 42, Paragraph C, the dismissal you are suggesting would constitute a reversible error based on procedural prejudice." The room went still. The judge's smirk faltered. "Excuse me?" Blackwood blinked. "Furthermore," Zara continued, her pace accelerating with surgical precision, "Mr. Thorne's motion to evict is predicated on a lease violation that does not legally exist, citing a clause that was struck down by the state Supreme Court in Doe versus Holloway 3 years ago. If we proceed with your current line of questioning, we risk a mistrial on the grounds of judicial bias." A collective gasp swept through the gallery. Thorne sat up straighter, his smile vanishing. "I object," Thorne sputtered, standing up. "Your Honor, I have reason to believe this. This child is misrepresenting herself. She is not a licensed attorney." Zara turned her gaze toward the prosecutor, her eyes sharp. "I can provide my credentials to the bailiff immediately, Mr. Thorne, but I assure you my standing here is absolute." "Who are you?" Judge Blackwood demanded, his face flushing a deep, angry red. Zara reached into her leather satchel and withdrew a document, sliding it across the table to the bailiff. The officer handed it up to the judge. Blackwood snatched the paper, his eyes scanning the text. His hands began to tremble. He looked at the document, then at Zara, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. To understand the silence that followed, one must return to where it began. The story started in the gritty gray borough of North Haven, where 18-year-old Zara Vance lived with her great-aunt, Nana Rose. Zara was an anomaly, a phantom in the system. She had devoured law libraries by age 8 and passed the state bar exam at 16, a feat she had kept hidden from the world, preferring the quiet hum of anonymity to the glare of media attention. Nana Rose, a retired social worker, had taught her that power was best used silently. The catalyst had occurred 2 weeks prior at a local bodega. Zara was buying milk when she heard weeping in the aisle. Elena Ross, a single mother of 2, was pleading with the shop owner for advice. "I have nowhere to go," Elena sobbed, wiping her eyes. "Sterling Holdings says I violated the lease because of excessive occupancy. It's just me and my girls. He's lying because he wants to gentrify the block." Zara approached her. "Do you have your papers?" Elena looked up, confused by the teenager standing over her. "What?" "Your lease, your rent receipts. Do you have them?" "Yes, at home, but—" "Show me," Zara said, a quiet fire igniting in her chest. "I can help." Elena was skeptical, but desperation makes for strange alliances. Over the next week, Zara dissected the documents. Marcus Sterling, the city's most notorious slumlord, had fabricated the claims. When Zara sent a cease and desist letter on formal letterhead, Sterling ignored it. When she helped Elena file a motion in housing court, The neighborhood buzzed with rumors of the girl genius taking on the giant. Back in the courtroom, Judge Blackwood finally found his voice, though it lacked its earlier thunder. The court acknowledges the counsel's credentials, Blackwood stammered. Miss Vance, you may proceed, but be warned, this court will show you no leniency based on your age. I expect none, Your Honor, Zara replied coolly. She proceeded to dismantle the prosecution's opening arguments with a ferocity that left the gallery breathless. She cited obscure precedents and highlighted the mathematical impossibilities in the landlord's timeline. By the time the recess was called, Marcus Sterling, sitting in the back row, looked ready to commit murder. During the break, Elena leaned toward Zara, her hands shaking. Did you see their faces? They're terrified of you. Good, Zara said, organizing her files. Fear makes them sloppy. But Sterling was not a man who played by the rules. The next morning, as Zara walked up the courthouse steps, 2 uniformed police officers blocked her path. Behind them, Sterling stood with his arms crossed, a smug grin plastered on his face. Ms. Vance, one officer said grimly, we need you to come to the precinct. Mr. Sterling has filed a complaint alleging you falsified evidence in a legal proceeding. Elena gasped, clutching Zara's arm. They can't do this. It's an intimidation tactic, Zara whispered to her client. She turned to the officer, her chin high. Am I under arrest? Just questioning for now. Fine. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling my counsel. At the precinct, Zara sat in a sterile interrogation room. She didn't fidget. When the detective tried to pressure her, the door swung open. Enter Mr. Abernathy, an old friend of Nana Rose and a retired constitutional lawyer with a reputation like a bulldog. Unless you have proof my client forged a digital timestamp, which is technically impossible given the blockchain verification she used, you are detaining her illegally, Abernathy growled. The detective, realizing he was being used as a pawn in a civil dispute, folded. You're free to go. This isn't over, Zara said as she walked out, locking eyes with Sterling across the lobby. He didn't smile this time. When court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. The defense was desperate. Attorney Thorne stood up, waving a thick folder. Your Honor, we have new evidence, Thorne announced. Financial records indicating Ms. Ross has been receiving undisclosed income, rendering her claim of financial hardship fraudulent. Zara stiffened. She hadn't seen this. The judge granted a 24-hour continuance to review the documents. That night, Zara sat in her small living room with Jax, a cybersecurity student she'd known since kindergarten. The bank statements showed large deposits into Elena's account from a company called Apex Ventures. I've never heard of Apex, Elena cried. I swear, Zara, I've never taken a dime from them. I believe you, Zara said, her eyes glued to her laptop. Jax, trace the routing number. Jax typed furiously. It's a shell, he muttered after 20 minutes. Registered in the Caymans. No employees. But look at the holding company. Zara leaned in. Sterling Global Assets. He's paying himself, Zara realized. He deposited money into a dummy account with Elena's name attached to it to frame her. I can prove it, Jax grinned. The metadata on the transfer order originated from an IP address inside Sterling's main office. The next day, Zara walked into court carrying a projector. When it was her turn, she didn't just argue, she put on a clinic. She projected the digital trail on the wall, linking Apex Ventures directly to Marcus Sterling's personal trust. Mr. Sterling didn't just fabricate evidence, Zara declared, pointing at the landlord. He committed wire fraud and perjury in an attempt to manipulate this court. Judge Blackwood turned to Sterling, his face a mask of fury. Mr. Sterling, is this true? Before Sterling could stammer a denial, the courtroom doors burst open. Federal agents, alerted by the digital trail Jax had anonymously forwarded, marched down the aisle. Marcus Sterling, the lead agent announced, you are under arrest for racketeering and wire fraud. Pandemonium erupted. The gavel banged uselessly as Sterling was handcuffed and dragged out, screaming that it was a setup. Zara sat back, exhaling slowly. It should have been over, but it wasn't. The following day, despite his client being in federal custody, Silas Thorne appeared in court, looking haggard but determined. Your Honor, Thorne argued, my client's arrest does not negate the countersuit for defamation we filed yesterday. We intend to prove that Ms. Vance's accusations have caused irreparable harm to the Sterling brand. You have got to be kidding me, Elena whispered. He's flailing, Zara assured her. But the judge has to hear it. Thorne called a new witness, a woman who claimed to be a neighbor. She testified that Elena ran an illegal, unlicensed daycare out of her apartment, creating a noise nuisance and violating fire codes. I see children dropped off there every day, the woman lied, avoiding eye contact. Zara approached the stand for cross-examination. She held a stack of photos Jax had scraped from social media. Ms. Davies, Zara said softly, you work for Bayside Property Management, correct? Yes. And Bayside Property Management is a subsidiary of Sterling Holdings? I don't know. Let me refresh your memory. Zara handed her a payroll stub. Is this your signature? The witness crumbled. She admitted Sterling's associates had offered her a bonus to testify. Thorne slumped in his chair, defeated. As the trial neared its conclusion, the danger escalated. That evening, as Zara walked to her car, a man in a dark trench coat stepped out from behind a pillar. It was Victor Krell, a private investigator known for doing the dirty work the law wouldn't touch. You're playing a dangerous game, little girl, Krell rasped, blocking her path. Smartest play now? Drop the case. Walk away. Zara didn't flinch. She took a step closer to him. You think intimidation works on me? I just took down a multimillionaire. You're just the cleanup crew. Krell sneered, stepping forward, but a car horn blared. Jax's SUV screeched to a halt next to them. Krell cursed and vanished into the shadows. Get in, Jax said, his face pale. We're ending this tomorrow. The final day of court was electric. Reporters packed the benches. Zara delivered her closing argument not just to the judge, but to the city. This case is not about a lease, Zara's voice rang out, clear and unwavering. It is about a system that believes wealth is a license to exploit. Mr. Sterling believed that because Elena Ross was poor, she was powerless. He believed that because I was young and black, I was incompetent. He was wrong. She looked directly at Thorne. Justice is not a commodity to be bought. It is a right to be defended. Judge Blackwood took 3 hours to deliberate. When he returned, the courtroom held its breath. In the matter of Sterling versus Ross, this court finds in favor of the defendant, Blackwood ruled. The eviction is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring Attorney Silas Thorne to the State Bar for disciplinary action regarding the subornation of perjury. The room exploded in cheers. Elena wept openly, hugging Zara so hard she nearly lifted the girl off the floor. As they exited the courthouse, cameras flashed. The headline the next morning read, Teen Titan topples Sterling Empire. But for Zara, the victory was merely a prologue. Weeks later, the phone calls started coming. Not threats, but pleas for help. Tenants from across the city, inspired by the story, were reaching out. Grandma, Zara said one evening, looking at the stack of letters. I can't do this alone. Then don't, Nana Rose smiled, setting down a cup of tea. Build an army. Zara did just that. She founded the Vanguard Initiative, a non-profit legal collective dedicated to housing justice. Jax ran the digital forensics. Elena, now safe in her home, managed the intake of new clients. The threats never fully vanished, and Krell still lurked in the periphery. But Zara Vance was no longer just a prodigy in the shadows. She was a force of nature. 6 months later, the Vanguard Initiative faced its biggest test. A conglomerate attempted to buy an entire city block for a luxury complex, a deal that would displace hundreds. The signing meeting was scheduled in a glass-walled boardroom downtown. The investors were raising their champagne glasses when the doors swung open. Zara Vance walked in, flanked by Jax and a team of young lawyers. She dropped a heavy file onto the mahogany table. Gentlemen, Zara said, her smile sharp as a razor, I believe we need to discuss the zoning fraud in your proposal. Or would you prefer I send this directly to the Attorney General? One of the investors, recognizing her from the news, went pale. He slowly lowered his glass. She's back, he whispered. Zara Vance stood tall, the echo of the gavel still ringing in her mind, ready for the next fight. She was just getting started. The victory against Marcus Sterling was not the end. It was the spark that ignited a firestorm. In the months following the trial, The Vanguard Initiative ceased to be a mere idea discussed over Nana Rose's kitchen table and transformed into a formidable entity. Operating out of a small donated space in a community center, Zara, Jax, and Elena worked tirelessly to process the flood of requests pouring in from tenants across the city. However, as their influence grew, so did the shadows looming over them. The Sterling verdict had rattled the cages of powerful men who thrived on the exploitation of the vulnerable, and they were not content to let a teenager dismantle their empires without a fight. One late evening, as Zara sat alone in the office reviewing case files, the silence was broken by the harsh buzz of the landline. When she answered, a voice, low, distorted, and dripping with menace, spoke from the other end. "You think you've won, but you don't understand how deep this goes," the caller hissed. "Walk away while you still can, little girl. Consider this your last warning." Zara's grip tightened on the receiver, her knuckles turning white. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Someone who knows how to make problems disappear," the voice replied with a dark chuckle before the line went dead. She immediately called Jax. "We need to report this," he urged, his voice laced with concern. "They're scared of what you're building, Zara." "I know," Zara replied, staring out the window at the dark street below. "And that means we're doing something right." The intimidation tactics escalated. Strange sedans began idling outside her home, and one morning she found a note taped to her front door. "Quit while you can." But rather than retreating, Zara sharpened her focus. She knew these were the throes of a corrupt system fighting for its survival. The breaking point came when Jax, monitoring the digital footprint of Sterling's former associates, uncovered a massive new real estate deal. "Zara, you need to see this," Jax said, rushing into the office one afternoon, his laptop open. "I've been tracking activity tied to Sterling's old network. There's a shell company, Apex Ventures, finalizing a purchase tomorrow." "Apex again?" Zara asked, leaning in. "Yes. They're buying a massive block of low-income housing downtown. The plan is to evict everyone within 30 days and flip the property into luxury condos. It's a textbook gentrification scheme, identical to Sterling's playbook." Zara's eyes scanned the screen. "If this goes through, dozens of families will be on the street." "I found out where the signing is happening," Jax said, pointing to a calendar entry he had decrypted. "Tomorrow morning, downtown Corporate Plaza. If we can disrupt that meeting and expose the zoning fraud inherent in their plan, we might be able to stop it." The next morning, Zara, Jax, and Elena arrived at the gleaming steel and glass tower where the deal was set to close. They carried with them a dossier of evidence Jax had compiled overnight. As they approached the elevators, a familiar figure stepped out from the wall blocking their path. It was Victor Krell. The private investigator leaned casually against the marble wall, a smirk playing on his lips. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," Krell drawled, looking Zara up and down. "But you're way out of your league this time. These aren't just slumlords, these are sharks." Zara didn't break stride. She stepped closer, her eyes cold and hard. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe you and your friends are finally about to lose." Krell chuckled, shaking his head. "Good luck. You'll need it." Ignoring him, Zara pressed the elevator button. The doors slid shut, sealing them in as they ascended to the penthouse boardroom. Through the glass walls of the conference room, Zara could see a group of men in expensive suits gathered around a mahogany table, documents spread out before them. They were laughing, the air thick with the smell of expensive cologne and prematurely celebrated victory. Taking a deep breath, Zara pushed the heavy glass doors open and stepped inside. The laughter died instantly. Every head turned toward the young woman in the charcoal blazer, standing at the head of the table. "Can we help you?" one of the investors asked, his tone dripping with irritation. Zara slammed the thick folder onto the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "I'm here to stop you from destroying people's lives." The men exchanged amused glances. One of them, a silver-haired man at the center, leaned back. "You have no authority here, kid. Get out before we call security." "You can call security if you want," Zara said, her voice projecting clear and strong across the room. "But this folder contains proof that your zoning applications rely on fraudulent environmental impact studies. The evidence is already on its way to the media, in the Attorney General's office. She opened the folder, sliding copies of the falsified reports toward them. This deal isn't just unethical, she continued, locking eyes with the silver-haired man. It's illegal, and if you sign those papers today, you won't just be facing a lawsuit. You'll be facing federal indictments. The room fell into a stunned silence. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by palpable fear. One of the investors picked up a document, his hands trembling slightly as he read the highlighted sections. "We need to discuss this privately," he muttered to his colleagues, looking rattled. "She's right," the silver-haired investor said, standing up abruptly. He looked at Zara with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "We can't take this risk. We're pulling out." Chaos erupted as the investors began packing their briefcases, shooting glaring looks at one another. The deal was dead. As Zara walked out of the conference room, adrenaline coursing through her veins, she found Victor Krell waiting by the elevators. He wasn't smirking anymore. He watched her with a strange expression, something between annoyance and grudging respect. "You really don't quit, do you?" Krell asked quietly. Zara turned to him, her expression unyielding. "Not when people's lives are at stake." Krell gave her a small, curt nod before turning and walking away, disappearing into the labyrinth of the building. The story of the showdown at the corporate plaza spread like wildfire, solidifying Zara Vance's reputation as a fearless advocate for the voiceless. The housing block she saved became a symbol of hope for the city, and the Vanguard Initiative exploded in size, with donations and volunteers flooding in to support the cause. That evening, back in the quiet safety of Nana Rose's living room, the team sat together, exhausted but triumphant. "It feels like we're just scratching the surface," Zara admitted, staring into her tea. "There's so much more to do." Nana Rose reached across the table, covering Zara's hand with her own. Her eyes shone with pride. "You've already made a difference, Zara. You're inspiring others to stand up, too. That's how real change begins." Elena nodded, tears in her eyes. "You gave me my life back. You're doing more than just fighting cases. You're giving people hope." A sense of profound purpose washed over Zara. "Then I guess we keep going," she smiled. And she did. Years later, Zara Vance would go on to become a renowned attorney and activist, leading a nationwide movement for tenant rights and housing reform. The Vanguard Initiative expanded into a powerful organization, rewriting laws to protect the vulnerable and holding the powerful accountable. Though the threats never fully disappeared, Zara never wavered. She had learned early on that the fight for justice was never easy, but for every family like Elena's that found their voice, it was always worth it.